Good morning, everybody. We are just admitting people in through the lobby, so it's 11:01. We'll give it a minute or two still, just to allow for anyone who's still signing in. Okay, so we're at 11:03. I think we've got most people have joined. We might have a few more join us over the next few minutes, but if we get going, and thank you first of all for joining us this morning, where my colleague Saba and I will be discussing the emerging benefit trends that we're seeing, both from industry research, but also from talking with clients and providers alike. Just some housekeeping to start with before we get going formally. We'll be recording this session and sharing it after the event, and I think it's even going to be posted on YouTube, so you can refer back to it afterwards. So no need to sort of frantically scribble notes down and things like that. It will be there for your reference afterwards. And if I can ask everybody just to go on mute, if that's okay, just to avoid any distractions or background noises. Any questions though, please do raise them. If you could raise them in the chat feature, that would be great on Teams. We'll ensure that we've got enough time to address these at the end with help from Rachel from Pro Manchester. And just to take the opportunity now to thank Rachel and the Pro Manchester team for giving us the opportunity and for hosting with us today. So as I say, please do raise anything that you like in the chat feature. Our contact details will be at the end as well. So if you'd like a further discussion after today's webinar, we'll be really keen to have that with you. I'm Andy Simpson, and I'm joined today by my colleague Saba Harron. We're both colleagues within Lockton's People Solutions team, where we help clients through their pension and their benefit strategy, broking and ongoing management. So what we're hoping to cover this morning, well, first of all, I mean, our agenda really is to take a delve into what employees are expecting from the future workplace and share some research and also explore what employers can do to stay ahead of the curve and what the employees should be looking to do to attract and retain the workforce of the future. Before we begin though, as much as we probably don't want to, we'll have a review of the state of the nation as it currently is. We really had to script this slide back, actually. Given the volume of events over the last few years, we're not short of any news headlines. But focusing on some of the major events that are affecting us and will continue to affect employers and employees alike, and just to take a few of these headlines, we all know, for example, the catastrophic impact on the NHS since the beginning of COVID, and it continues to buckle under the pressure. The impact of Brexit has also added fuel to the fire there and added really severe challenges facing health and social care system in the UK. Recruitment continues to be a challenge, and with the post-Brexit exodus of staff within the NHS, the waiting times are now the longest they've ever been. The Russian war has seen gas and energy prices reach unprecedented highs, plummeting many households into poverty and debt. And along with a hike in food and goods and services, inflation is reaching an all-time high. This has had an impact on people's disposable income, with many households feeling the pinch and turning to their employer for a solution. A second global recession is looming, and the World Bank has warned that it slashed its growth forecast for almost all advanced economies this year and next, marking the first time since the Second World War that two global recessions will have occurred in the same decade. And all of this at a time where we're facing a challenging labour market and economic recession. So as a backdrop, 2023 is set to be a challenging year for many. And one of the biggest challenges that employers are facing is around recruitment and retention. And before we look at what employers can do to combat this, it's worth perhaps just spending a little time looking at what the future generation will need from the workplace and the challenges that this will bring. And as we look to the future, we believe there'll be three major drivers. First of all, growth and use of technology, demographic, social and economic changes, and also labour flexibility. Now, according to Gallup, Generation Zs and Millennials now make up 46% of the full-time workforce in the US, and Millennials will represent 75% of the global workforce by 2025. So how do we prepare for the future workforce? Well, first of all, by identifying who they are, understanding their needs, and addressing what's important to them. We've looked at the UK landscape, and we know that we're heading into a period of uncertainty with rising costs and potential recession. But what do the future workforce worry about, and how will that inform employers in managing their benefit strategy? Well, the top concern of the next generation is that of cost of living and climate change. And it's accounting for over 50% of responses from both millennials, who are those born 1981 to 96, and Generation Zs, those born 97 to 2012. We need to appreciate the impact that the cost of living crisis is having on this generation. They're more likely to suffer from financial stress and anxiety, and will expect you as the employer to provide them with support. While short-term living costs are a priority for many, all too many are still not financially aware, including how to best make use of savings and ISAs and pensions, and importantly, saving for retirement really from the day that they set foot in the workplace. Our next generation will also worry about the world. They're more environmentally and socially conscious, and will expect you to be the same. They'll come with higher levels of environmental concern, with desires to positively impact change, and will look to those values for their future employer too. This generation will have far less employer loyalty, with a limited span at employers averaging just 2 years in a continued effort to climb the career ladder and progress. Pay will be one of the many reasons that they'll move on, but also employers will question their employers' values and whether they align with their own. And we're seeing this through COVID and what was branded as the Great Resignation, as many employees realised that their employer's focus was in a different direction to their own. We know right now that it's a candidate's market. Flexibility is an expectation, not a benefit. And the expectation is that this will continue. Location shouldn't be a barrier. Obviously, some roles and industries will be an exception here. But this also represents an opportunity to reduce the geographical barriers and open employers up to a more diverse talent pool. Do you need, for example, to recruit within your local geography still? Do you need people to be able to commute into your office? Or actually, can you open up roles to overseas employees, potentially reducing your cost of labour? We've seen various initiatives such as the results-only working environment, or ROE, which is a concept where work is something which employees do, not a place that they go. The focus here is on output, not on the number of hours worked or the time in the office, and employees are fully autonomous and accountable for producing their own results. So what does this mean for employers? Well, flexibility and hybrid working will be the expectation, not the norm. Obviously, some industries and roles will be the exception here. Now we're dealing with a multi-generational workforce, and everyone will have very different requirements, with up to 5 generations of employees in the workplace at the moment. Digital will continue to evolve as businesses look to create more efficiencies, and employees look to access information at a quicker pace. And we're starting to see the need for more upskilling and reskilling, partly due to remote working and removing access to in-office training. So the challenge for many employers will be how to create an infrastructure to deploy training effectively in a way that is right for their employees and their learning preferences. DE&I is now a driver behind corporate success, but more importantly, from a people perspective, a diverse and inclusive workforce is associated with better individual performance, since employees feel motivated and engaged, but it also leads to a higher collective performance, since there's a diversity of thought across the organisation, leading to successful decision making. The biggest areas pulling all of these themes together is that of engagement and well-being. Our business and people are really going to be tested over the next few years as we weather the economic climate. So, Saba, just to introduce you here, what do we need to stay ahead of the curve?
Thanks, Andy. Morning, everyone. So everything we're seeing in the research and the work that we're doing with our clients comes back to the well-being of our people. And it's fair to say that the stats that we're going to share, combined with other research, won't come as a surprise to everyone else. And if you can move on the slide, thank you. Perfect. So well-being goes way beyond physical health. So it's about looking after not just physical health, mental health, but financial well-being. And they're all interconnected. So we've been very good in the past at sectioning out mental health well-being as one sort of channel, financial as another, and physical as another. But now actually these are more integrated than they've ever been. And well-being really starts at the top down. We've recognised that this is not a tick box exercise. We've spoken to many clients around this and what they're doing. And for employees, we spend the majority of our time in the workplace. And as Andy touched on, when we're looking at things like millennials, the next generation coming into the workplace, there are some real key sort of factors that are coming in and contributing to what we're going to have to do as an employment group. So happy workforce speaks for itself. The better we are at retention, the better we can create staff loyalty. Andy mentioned that we know employees are averaging 2 years a job before they move on. So the challenge that we now have is to attract, retain, and really nurture that talent. And especially in a world where the labour force challenges are so significant for us just now. We want to improve performance and engagement. So, again, listening to the employees, really engaging with them. The more they feel valued, the more likely they will be to perform at their best. And again, things like addressing absenteeism, we've seen a lot during COVID in terms of, the stress and I guess the pressures on employees from working from home, changing sort of remote positions and just trying to adapt to the new way of working. So employees who feel that you really care about their well-being and that you've put measures in place to support it are more likely to come back to work and stay there. And the biggest factor, again, we've got is recruitment. So we need a more compelling story now for future candidates to be able to outline what your strategy is around well-being, diversity and inclusion. And this all talks to the talent of the future. So you now need to recruit from a very different talent base whose expectations go far beyond salary. And I guess the question that then poses is, what do employers have to do to support their employees, Andy?
Yeah, so thanks, Hannah. There's plenty that can be done from a well-being perspective to support your employees' well-being. So first of all, and perhaps most importantly, is to consider a flexible workplace. We've touched on this before, but giving employees the flexibility to work around their life has a huge impact on their well-being. Being able to do the school run or allow for gym breaks or attend a doctor's or private appointment during the day, for example, can really help if that's at all possible and feasible. You can try and promote an active lifestyle, and we're not talking about getting everyone to run a marathon here, but research from the British Heart Foundation has shown that adults of working age in England spend on average 9.5 hours per day of sedentary time. People who spend a long time sitting have been found to have higher levels of diabetes and cardiovascular disease, and health implications there for employees that are serious, but also for the employers in terms of the long-term costs, such as your medical and disability premiums. And this is why we're seeing a shift in perspective and towards preventative measures in the healthcare space. Greater access to healthcare, I think, is really important. And you should want to make it easier for your employees to access care whenever they need and without delays and high costs. Providing access to benefits such as health cash plans, medical insurance, virtual GPs can be invaluable. But there are many healthcare providers who also offer apps for the delivery and the management of those services, and that will put the control in your employees' hands as well. So it's about being aware of and leveraging some of those added value benefits that providers make available. A lot of these services are free or they're embedded within existing benefit packages that you may have, and they're available without the need for additional budget. And while benefiting employees, they'll also help you manage your sickness and your absenteeism levels. Mental health initiatives such as mental health first aiders, training for line managers to help spot the signs of stress and changes within their employees, and to really help engage in the conversation is really important. Having a good EAP program can also help support with the right mix of online and offline support and counselling. And preventative measures such as mindfulness, good working practices, so taking time away from the screen, for example, and addressing your working culture and environment will really help. The working environment now is really critical. We've seen a lot of thriving opportunities create an environment of openness and inclusivity. And an inclusion first approach really creates a culture where everyone feels valued, appreciated, and ultimately engaged. Social events and group activities can really support this, but you've got to do what's appropriate for your workforce, especially if you've got remote workers. You should review working practices as well. So a lot of job roles have changed, locations have changed over the last few years in particular. And you've got to question whether your working practices have changed and do you need to realign these at all, especially now post-COVID. Do you need to review your flexible working practices and have you reviewed your holiday or leave entitlement? And do they need to be reviewed for being outdated as well? And again, we've talked to a lot of clients where we're seeing a greater shift in organisations offering flexible holidays, not enforcing leave on bank holidays or at Christmas time perhaps, where it's always been traditional, but offering more flexibility to allow individuals to celebrate their own religious festivals or New Year's at a different time. From a career development perspective, are your development opportunities clear and accessible to all? Do employees have a clarity around their role and expectations for progression? And do you offer the right mix of skills and personal development opportunities for your employees as well? More organisations are using mentorship programs and using this to partner employees from different ages, backgrounds, and different levels within an organisation to access a more diverse experience for employees. And this will feed nicely into your DE&I strategy as well. From a CSR perspective, as part of your responsibility initiatives, could you offer your employees days off for volunteering, for example? Is it feasible to give a wellbeing allowance as part of their benefits package to allow them to spend something on their own health and wellbeing related benefits such as gym memberships? And could you provide employees with a wellbeing or mindfulness app that can be built into their personal development objectives? All of which can support your employee wellbeing. But one big focus, and we'll take a deeper look at a big area that you can offer more support potentially, is around that of your people's wellbeing in their mental health. So the mental health focus really took off, I would say, around a decade or so ago, but has really exploded through COVID. As a benefits broker, we've witnessed this from clients, but also the volume of new startup providers in the marketplace offering their solutions. The cost of not addressing your employees' mental health is also skyrocketing. And a recent survey, or a recent update rather, on the Stevenson Pharma report now estimated that poor mental health costs in excess of £2,000 per employee. And that's across all employees as well, not just those who are ill. So investing in mental health interventions has a really sizable return. But it's also important to get the culture, the framework, and the resources in place within your organisation. So firstly, employers mental health and addressing this should be something that your organization really feels passionately about, rather than just a tick box exercise. It needs to come from the top, with senior leaders being able to back any HR policy or cultural change. And some of the best examples that I've witnessed are where somebody at C-suite level opens up perhaps to their employees about their own mental health struggles, breaking down the barriers, reducing the stigma, and making it far more accessible for all. This really encourages your employees to do the same and seek the support that they may need, rather than just bottling it up. You'll also have services and support available, usually embedded within your benefits package. And as I mentioned earlier, even a low-cost EAP will have some vital resources. And if you're not sure what's available, I'd really urge you to speak with your benefits broker. The responsibility, though, for encouraging positive mental health should not just sit with HR. So you can engage well-being or mental health champions across your business. You could look to mental health first aiders, and you could really make sure that this is fed in with your ESG framework. Managers really should be appropriately equipped as well to spot the signs of stress or burnout within their teams and know how to signpost and help their people. And really, from ground level up, I think all employees should be aware of their own mental health and what support the company can offer for them. We all have mental health at the end of the day. It's something which people need to recognise will vary from hour to hour, from day to day, and week to week. So we'll move between poor mental health and good mental health states on a spectrum. And the key is how to identify when you have poor mental health and how to transition yourself back into positive mental health, and what proactive strategies you can take to help maintain that. There are plenty of external resources, and at Locked In here, we've published a series of articles that highlight sort of key areas of mental health and how to support that. And we've got our own toolkit for mental health in particular for our clients. We'll be happy to talk to you separately about this if you feel you need further support and resources.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, moving on from that, I guess the big part of sort of having this conversation, opening up the dialogue is around how you really approach your strategy for employee engagement and communication. So we know that employee engagement communication now brings with it challenges, mainly due to the diverse nature of our workforce, and especially more so with an increase in hybrid working. It makes it more challenging to make sure we have the right communication. Companies always look after products, commodities, services, but the biggest asset are your people. And if you fail to understand what they need, then that can have a detrimental impact on your business. Employers who value their employees and keep them engaged and foster an environment of open and honest communication benefit from having a more dedicated, engaged and skilled workforce. And those who fail to look after and nurture their workforce run the risk of failing their business and their customers. So what does it mean having disengaged employees? Well, it can be really detrimental. Disengaged workforce, firstly, is costly for employers. It impacts companies' time, resource, and it can also drive away other engaged employees. On the back of that, things like recruitment costs, the time that it takes to look in the market, the time that it takes to train, that can have a huge cost on employers, and more so just now that we're working with are finding it difficult due to the skills shortage to recruit for certain positions. And high absenteeism. So if the mental health strategy isn't there and you're not really engaged with your employees and you're not working with them, that again impacts your business report resource. And it links back to what Andy was talking about earlier. So employee engagement is no longer an intangible, measurable sort of aspect. It's now recognised as a major contributing factor to business success. And actually, it costs the UK economy about £340 billion every year. So it is something that we really need to look at, and it's important that we create a strategy to properly support that. So how do we improve it? So we've already seen that millennials will now account for 75% of the global workforce by 2025. We've already discussed that we know that they will have very different requirements from the workplace. So employers really need to change and adapt to react to the needs of the new generation. So this is going to require a more collaborative approach from the bottom up. So if we're going to include and engage employees, However, it's important to make sure that you consider the whole of the workforce, because there's going to be a number of different generations in play now, and communication really needs to take a more holistic approach with different mediums for different populations. So how do we do it? So we need to make it part of the culture. So we've all done engagement, we all manage communications, whether it be sort of internal, whether it's benefits related, whether it's company related, but we need to create a sort of a more structured strategy around how this should be embedded and how this links into your culture and values as well. Listen to your employees. This is not a new concept. We've done surveys in the past, but really having a more deeper dive into the opinions of your employees will really help inform your benefit strategy and your overall strategy. So things like running focus groups, making sure that you demonstrate that you're taking feedback on board and changes are happening as a result of that. Some of the biggest challenges are around the tools and how we work. Poor systems, lack of digital efficiencies, that will become cumbersome. You need to make it easy for employees, and you should want to create ease, efficiencies and the right tools that are relevant for your demographics. So for example, if you offer benefits, are you using a benefits platform to communicate, engage your employees to make sure people are aware of what's available to them? Are you managing absence and leave through online recording systems? I mean, it'll vary from employer to employer, but many things, many things that are easy, you need to make it as easy and accessible for your workforce, and that's the key. The communication needs to be relevant. There's a lot of communication, a lot of information out there, but make sure it's in their language, it's in a medium that they can absorb that information, and it must be accurate, clear, concise, with no ambiguity. We want to open a two-way conversation, so employees really need to have a voice, and they need to feel that they can speak up without fear of reprisal or just not being heard. And you want to provide and promote relevant value-added benefits. So Andy spoke a lot about things that we can do in the mental health space. As employers, you spend a huge amount of money on your benefits, and you really want to make sure your employees understand and know the value of what you're doing. So the signposts need to be clear. And especially with the financial pressures that your employees are under just now, helping them understand the resources that are available to them. So things like the Employee Assistance Programme, if you have counselling services, Andy mentioned cash plans for sort of basic spend, things that help with dental costs, private medical, all of these things that will help and support them in their day-to-day lifestyle, and probably more so goes towards helping in the current cost of living crisis. So we're looking at engagement. There's other elements that will come into play when we're talking about benefits and what we need to look at. And these are really heavily focusing on environmental, social and governance. So ESG is a big topic now across the board. We've got millennials coming through that are now focused on things like climate change, carbon emissions, pollution levels. And you really need to, as a business, consider how you're going to reduce your impact on the environment through focusing on your initiatives, things like supply chain, waste, pollution, decarbonisation. And the social element now is even more relevant than before. So organisations now looking at how what they do, what they behave, their policies, how does that impact on their staff, wider stakeholders, the community. This area considers factors such as gender diversity, gender inclusion, modern slavery, mental health, CSR, etc. And the governance element itself focusing on your organisational policies. How are you addressing things like tax, fair remuneration, structures at board level, etc. So the first thing we want to do is probably look at repositioning the benefits offering. So once we start to really drill down into actually what you offer, you really start to get a little bit more of a clearer picture as to how that fits into the ESG element. And we've started to see more employers now shifting and adapting and revising their strategies around ESG. Firstly, review what you've got. So you'll have a huge amount of benefits within the business, whether it's policies, some are tangible benefits as part of your employment contracts. There will be other things that you do around the business, and really look at where these align and where these fit into the sort of ESG pillars. So some typical things we see around the environmentals, a lot of employers offer things like cycle to work, electric vehicles, carpooling, reviewing things like working hour policies now as well. We were seeing a huge impact with things like the rail strike, people getting to work is becoming challenging. So there's a whole load of other economic factors that are now coming into play that we didn't necessarily have to deal with before. Pensions is a big one as well. So this is probably a little bit close to my heart. But Make My Money Matters did a survey in 2021. They showed that UK pension industry enables more CO2 than all UK carbon emissions. But actually, as an employer, this is probably the least sort of touched on point that people are aware of. So really understanding where people's money are invested, how are they making sure that they, that they keep on top of that information. And just making sure that, we're adhering to sort of the standards that are available in the industry and where we're all trying to benchmark and get to. And moving on to sort of social aspects. So again, there's a huge amount that comes into play here. So are you addressing sort of, the needs of your people in this space? So a good way to address it is by considering things like, opening up how you offer benefits. So could you be doing things like offering a flexible benefits or spending accounts, helping sort of gear your benefit options towards your demographics, so that could be for things like spending environmental benefits. Could it be with regards to personal development, their well-being, financial education? All of that now sort of plays into that space. And do you offer support for male and females specifically? So things like fertility treatment, men's health. So we are seeing more and more of a driver in that space now. The next generation coming through are way more vocal than they have ever been. And that puts a lot of pressure on us as an industry, as employers, to make sure that we are able to now support this future generation. We touched a little bit of sort of DE&I as well. So again, this is becoming more and more sort of, I guess, important to employees as well. So looking at how the policies highlight areas that may be outdated and not supporting DE&I. We're now working with different sort of demographics within the workforce. So if you've got employees that are working past 65, are your benefits really geared up to support that? Do your insurances support it? Things like looking at life assurance and spouse's death in service. Does it, cover a modern workforce? Are we considering same-sex relationships, the impact on benefit payouts in these groups as well? And also just things like medical plans, like cover on, do your medical plans provide access and support for gender reassignment, gender dysmorphia, fertility, or gender-specific healthcare? So there is a huge amount now that we need to look at, and it's moving very much away from the traditional benefits package. I'm going to hand over to Andy to talk a little bit more just around, what we're going to now need to do to offer, and actually attract and retain the talent, and summarise the session.
Yeah, thank you, Saba. And we've seen some really key themes emerging from our research over the last few years, and through these unprecedented economic times as well. So if we're to look forward at what employers need to do to stay ahead of the curve, I think we can probably just look at the following areas as really key. First of all, the flexibility and work-life balance really is cited as #1 priority for Generation Z and millennials. And this is having a strategy that will work not just for your current workforce, but also for the future workforce that you're yet to meet. This is one of the top themes we're seeing in the benefit space as well. But remember that this is an expectation. This is not a benefit in itself. Opportunities for career development and the chance to make a difference and really feel valued and be part of something is a real key for the next generation as well, and something that you should want to embrace as an employer to be seen as employer of choice as well. And having those benefits in place that align to your core values but speak to what's important to your employees, I think is really key. So I think it's no longer about offering as many benefits as you can afford. It's more about looking at your approach to benefits through a holistic lens, which spans across the benefits and policies and what type of employer that you want to be. These need to be aligned, I think, to your values, really driven from the top down, and be part of the fabric of your organization. This is, as well as the financial reward, what your employees will regard as their employer value proposition, and really allow you to attract the talent of the future. So I think if we can give you 3 takeaways from today, first of all, is to understand your demographics, to audit your existing benefits and make sure they're aligned to your core values, and to establish a long-term sustainable strategy. So we'd love to help you along your journey. Meanwhile, happy to take any questions. I'll turn to Rachel at this point. I'm not sure we have any questions in the chat feature. But certainly I'm happy to open it up to the floor.
We don't have any questions as yet. anyone does have any questions, please plop them in the chat. Okay. So Andy and Saba, the first question is from Helen Burke. She asks, do you feel technology will play an important role in the future of employee benefits?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. We're starting to see more, I think, technology-enabled wellbeing players coming into the market. And I think from a benefits perspective, technology is definitely going to be the enabler from a communications perspective, especially as, when we have a more diverse workforce, we could end up with a more global workforce. I think technology is going to be the linchpin. We're definitely seeing that, whether it's across sort of pension providers, benefit providers, but also technology, what it will do is enable us to have more insight into data, and that will give us the analytics that we need to drive benefit decisions, strategy, etc. If that answers your question, Helen. I was going to say, Andy, do you want to pick up? Lee has got a question, sorry, to say, how do you measure well-being?
Yeah, I think measuring well-being is there's probably two strands to that. So there are direct measurements, and very much depending on what you measure at the moment. So many organisations will be measuring presenteeism or absenteeism rather. So you can very easily tell if somebody's at their desk or not. So are they in for the day? I think presenteeism is a much more challenging one to measure. So there are sort of direct and indirect measurables. When it comes to well-being will have an impact both on absenteeism and presenteeism, but there's also far more intangibles there as well. So it's very difficult to measure the output, the return on investment around investing in, for example, your employees' mental health. But some of the stats that we've shared today hopefully give you some business case there to perhaps take forward to say that this is an area that you should be investing in, based not just on the outcomes for your employees at the moment, but also the type of employer that you want to be. So by pitching yourself as an employer who is invested in your people's well-being, it's being able to attract the right talent, retain that talent as well, and have the right culture within your organisation. All of which is really, really hard to measure in pounds and pence, but ultimately it will pay dividends on the bottom line.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that, Andy, we're talking about the wellbeing space. We're seeing technology now playing a bigger part in actually doing this ROI on the wellbeing element. So things like providers coming into the space where they're giving more analytics in terms to help you drive what you need to do to sort of, I guess, manage things like mental health, absenteeism, etc. So there is more analytics now available to help support that agenda. I'm going to pick up the next. Thanks. I'm going to just pick up the next question on compressed working hours. So investigating a 9-day fortnight and wondering if we've got any experience and pros and cons of that. So we've actually this has been trialled in Scotland at the moment, and I don't have the sort of stats to hand, so we can pick that up and produce them later, but it has been having a positive impact. There hasn't been things like drop in productivity, but in terms of mental health, there's been a positive impact on employee mental health and that. So I've worked in a previous organisation where we did a 9-day fortnight, and actually it worked really, really well from I guess, an employee morale perspective. Really, really good. I think there is a more focused approach that employees bring within that type of working environment. I think we will start to see more of that, and it'll be interesting to see actually once the studies have all concluded where that ends up. But statistics at the moment are showing that has a positive impact on businesses and employee mental health as well.
Yeah, and I think just on the compressed working hours and having that element of flexibility, it's very much listening to your employees, finding out what will resonate with them, what will drive them, and see whether it's feasible within your organisation. And for some industries and some organisations, it won't be an option. Other areas where we've seen trials and there's been plenty publicised. So I mentioned the results-only working environment earlier within the presentation here. That's been something which has run for some time now, and it's not about working your typical 9 to 5 days a week, for example. It's the results in your work environment is very much focused on the output rather than the input. And actually, you'll know exactly what your business measurables are and your business results, because that's what your target is. And it's having people working towards those targets, really in whatever flexible working approach and weekly hours that they wish to, so long as they're driving those results. So I think, yeah, there are pockets where there have been some research and some trials run, and Sabi, you're right to point out the Scotland example recently.
That's great. Thank you both. Are there any more questions from anybody?
No, if there's not, I mean, Andy's contact details of mine are on the screen, so if you want to drop us a note or pick up on anything, then, you know, we'd be more than happy to discuss, and we'll be circulating the slides afterwards. But thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
And a final word from me. It's Rachel here from Pro Manchester. Actually, I shall put my camera on briefly. Yeah, just to thank you all for coming, and to say a big thank you to Andy and to Saba for a really useful presentation. I will send a feedback form tomorrow, and if it's okay, well, you've just said it is okay, Saba, I will circulate the slides as well, including contact details. So do feel free to get in touch with either of our speakers today. Okay, thanks all, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.